Hi everyone, Evan Lawson here. So I recently published a video that was about my score collection, and I went through it from A to Z, and I went through each score that I owned, and I talked about how I live in a small one-bedroom apartment, so I can only own so many scores. And I said definitively that that was all the scores that I own, but that is incorrect. I do own more scores than that. And what I have is another collection that I was going to go through today. Unfortunately, this one is not in alphabetical order. So I'm so sorry to those people that might freak out their brains by me just jumping in randomly with these scores. But these scores are like my big, massive A3 scores. Because, of course, as a conductor of contemporary music, as I am, I conduct a lot of contemporary classical music. A lot of my scores are big, giant scores. Or they're orchestral scores, right? So I want to go through this pile of scores with you today and talk about some other amazing pieces that you might want to look into or scores that you might want to study. Okay, so we are going to start with a score that's probably the newest in my collection. It's for the opera Fat Pig. This is a chamber opera which has music by Boehler and a libretto by Miriam Gordon-Stewart. And I had the absolute pleasure of conducting the Australian premiere of this opera recently with Forest Collective, the ensemble that I am the artistic director of. And this is a really remarkable opera. It deals with some incredible themes about a plus-size woman trying to find love and trying to navigate through a really toxic work environment and the response of her work colleagues. Response to the colleagues of the man she's in love with, his colleagues, to her and her being plus size. Anyway, fascinating opera. It caused some controversy in the original play when it was premiered, and the opera when it was premiered in the US and also here in Australia has sparked a lot of conversation around the position of plus-size women in our society. And of course, there's a lot of interesting things to talk about in terms of plus-size women in opera. From a musical perspective, it's a great little piece. So it's for 4 singers, and then it's a really nice little orchestra of 2 clarinets, percussion, and 3-string instruments, violin, viola, and cello. So for people interested in chamber opera, it's a really, really cool work worth looking into. Okay, so in my previous video when I went through the scores on my shelf, I talked a little bit about Brett Dean, amazing Australian composer, and talked through some of the scores of Brett's that I own. And another work of his that has gotten a lot of performances that he wrote for himself to play is his Viola Concerto. And this is a really fantastic score. I think I said in that video that Brett is a real master of structure and architecture, and he's a really phenomenal orchestrator. And this is a work that I often refer to in orchestration. Concertos are particularly challenging because you've got your solo line competing against the orchestra. So that's always a big consideration to make. I've written a concerto for harp and clarinet. It was a double concerto. So that was quite challenging because the harp can have challenges in how it fits inside the orchestra. So I referred to this piece a lot because a viola is similar to a clarinet, right? It's that middle line instrument, similar to a harp where it can have some challenges projecting over the orchestra, unlike a violin, cello, trumpet, they project really clearly over the orchestra. Some of those middle voice instruments don't. So a great piece to look at if that's what you're studying, interested in. Okay, this is a really fascinating piece. This is Georges Aperghis' Recitations, and these are a collection of solo unaccompanied vocal pieces. And these works, I find them really inspirational because the way he does the notation is that he'll take like a single line of music and then he'll like break it up. Or there is one where, this is the one I know pretty well, number 9, where he's written like one line and has broken it up into like you sing the last note, and then he just like progressively adds more and more information. So from a compositional perspective, I often look at these because it's like, what can you do with minimal amount of information to form a whole piece? Some of them, like this one, require like quite a lot of decision-making by the musician to choose like the order or the combination of text and voice sort of effects that they're going to perform. And some of them are almost like games. They're really, really cool pieces. I would strongly encourage you to listen to them if you're into contemporary classical music and you're trying to get into vocal music particularly. They're really, really cool. And they're kind of nonsensical. Like if you speak French, you'll be able to pick up like hints of words and sentences, but they never form full sentences. And he's a composer that I just really admire, and they're really cool pieces. I first heard the recitations performed by a really amazing singer from the United States, Tony Arnold. She presented some of them as a part of a contemporary music festival that I went to in Italy, and they've stuck with me ever since. So yeah, George Aperghis. Okay, I said that my scores were out of order, and I apologize because it is probably like very frustrating for some people to be jumping around so much, but I've got another Brett Dean score, and this score is for his Pastoral Symphony, which, you know, am I going to use the word masterpiece? I'm certainly going to use the usual words that I did in my previous video of like, seminal, you must know it, blah, blah, blah. So Pastoral Symphony by Brett Dean is, of course, in reference to Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral Symphony. This work is a chamber orchestra work with electronics, and it, again, from an orchestration perspective, there's so much to find in this piece and to study. His string writing, of course, he is a viola player. You know, there's some incredible techniques that only a string player would be able to know, but also only able to communicate in scores. Like his accuracy and his specification in his string writing is really inspiring to kind of go right to the core of exactly what you want to do. His wind writing is really good as well. I mean, so is his brass writing and his percussion writing. But yeah, a score I definitely refer to quite a lot is his Pastoral Symphony. Okay, the next one I have is very moth-eaten. It's a very sad old looking score. And I found this score in an office. And it is, of all things to find in an office, it is the full score of a photocopy of a full score of 8 songs from Mad King by Peter Maxwell Davies. And I talked about Peter Maxwell Davies in my previous video about his opera The Lighthouse, which is really, really fantastic. But this is the work that people know him for. So it tells this sort of weird roundabout story of King George III, who had bouts of insanity. And the work quotes Handel. Like there's moments that feel like Handel operas and Mozart, and you know, it's very referential of the time period of George III, but then turned on its head, and like it's as if you've taken acid and you're wandering through the royal palace. Like it is a really wild piece. It requires a small ensemble plus a singer, and the singer needs to have like something stupid, like a 8-octave range or something crazy to perform the role. And it is like a fever dream of a piece, but well worth exploring. So that's 8 songs from Mad King by Peter Maxwell Davies. The next score is one that is very close to my heart, and I talked a lot about this composer in the previous video, the A to Z video, and that's Arnold Schoenberg, and it's his Chamber Symphony, which he's got a few works that are titled Chamber Symphony, or certainly 2, and then sort of reorchestrations of one of them. This one, so this Chamber Symphony, which is Opus 9, he originally wrote for 15 instruments, which is the version that I performed. And it's got a really massive wind section with like 3 clarinets, 2 horns, like it's big, but then only 5 string players, 2 violins, viola, cello, bass. And so the woodwinds just overpower the strings. Like it's really, really difficult to get the balance right. So he rewrote it, I think, towards the end of his life, or certainly I'm going to say after the Second World War. Don't hold me to that, but I think it was after the Second World War. He rewrote it for full orchestra. And so I know that like the Sydney Symphony performed it recently, so it does get trotted out sometimes. And it's one of those works, I talked about the 12-tone system and what Schoenberg did to affect the change in the world. This comes just before that. So it's the period of music of Schoenberg's that I really like around the time that he wrote Pierrot Lunaire. So if you're interested in that pre-First World War sort of expressionist period of music, Arnold Schoenberg's Chamber Symphony is a great one to study, play, or conduct. And it is great for conductors because even though it is hard to get the balance right, you're only needing 15 musicians to conduct. So I did it for my master's recital because I was able to get 15 musicians together. Okay, the next score is a composer that I've known about for a long time, and I bought this score purely to just understand more of his music. But unfortunately, I still haven't delved as deep as I would like to into his music. He's a living composer by the name of Marc Anthony Turange. And he has written some really interesting operas. He has a strong influence from the jazz world, which I find really interesting. His opera that he's really well known for is about Anna Nicole Smith, which caused a bit of a controversy at the Royal Opera House when it was premiered. And that's how I found out about Marc Anthony Turange. And so I bought this piece, which is called Three Farewells. And it's for flute, clarinet, harp, and string quartet. And it's just a gorgeous little piece. And we performed the, I think, Australian premiere with Forest Collective many years ago now. So yeah, would definitely like to return to this piece one day. But a composer worth looking into, particularly if you do like jazz. He's got some really, really interesting works, like a piece for solo trombone that's something like Blood on the Dance Floor, I want to say it might be called. And his operas that have a lot of jazz. So yeah, have a listen to Turange. Okay, my next big, large, oversized score is a large score for 2 instruments. And it is a work by Beat Führer, who is I think, German composer, might be Austrian, called Lotofagos, and it's for soprano and double bass. And I had researched about Beat Führer. I'd read about him in, online about his music, but I'd never really heard any of it in Australia. So I wanted to program some. So we programmed what I think was the Australian premiere of Lotofagos with Forest Collective. It's a brilliant work, and he's a brilliant composer, like a real technician. And he, from a compositional perspective, is a composer that I really admire. He kind of walks this line between experimental techniques and weird sounds and weird sound worlds, but brings them into a way that is really refined and delicate and very clear from a communication perspective to its audience. And that's something that I strive for in my music. So Beat Führer, if you've not heard of him, Führer, I'm probably saying that completely wrong in my terrible German, have a listen to some of his music. Okay, this next piece is one that is could arguably be my artistic high point as a conductor. It is a really special work, and if you ever get the chance to see this work performed live, you must go. It is an absolute unmissable event. And it is a work by the composer Gerard Grisey, who is a French composer, and the work is titled 4 Songs to Cross the Threshold. And just saying that gives me shivers down my spine. Grisey wrote this work, and there is a story that goes around that says that he kind of predicted his own death as he wrote the work, and he did promptly die, I believe, the day after or something after he wrote it. It is this huge work for soprano and a chamber ensemble that encompasses saxophones, clarinets, there's tubas, there's percussion, harp, there's a violin and a flute and a trumpet soloist. And then all the other instruments are grouped into these sort of interesting groups where there's a woodwind instrument like a clarinet or a saxophone, a percussionist, a low string instrument like a cello or a bass. And so there's the 3 groups, and then there's the group of soloists, and then there's the singer. And then there's an amazing movement that's just the percussionists bashing and crashing away on drums. All the text comes from fragments of different death poetry. One is from a sarcophagus of a pharaoh or something like that from ancient Egypt. Another, I think, might be a medieval thing. It ends with this creepy and beautiful sort of lullaby. It's oh my God, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's such a fascinating piece of music and so cool. So if you get the chance to ever hear this or play in it or conduct it, oh my goodness, Gerard Grisey, 4 Songs to Cross the Threshold from 1998. It is a real absolute masterpiece. All right, the next score is a special one to me. I've never had the chance to perform this work. It's certainly one that I keep to study. And it is a work called Sordine. So I guess in English it's probably muted or something. And it's subtitled Music for Violin and Orchestra. So it's not titled as a concerto, but I guess you can think of it like that. And it's by Matthias Pintscher. I had the pleasure of working with Matthias over a summer at the Klartag Festival, where he mentored me and a whole lot of other conductor composers. And yeah, I've always loved his music. He presented many concerts in Melbourne with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra of his music, and I adore. He writes beautifully for the orchestra. He writes beautifully for string instruments. I believe he played the violin, so he knows them again, super intimately. And yeah, I love studying his music, and this is a piece that you could definitely spend some time with. And the next score follows on from my work with Matthias on that festival, and that is Yair Klartag, who's a fabulous composer, who is one of the other participants in this festival that I did. And this is a work for string orchestra that he wrote and performed at the festival called Con Forza di Gravità. And at this festival, so a little tidbit of like information for those of you out there who might be conductors who are studying. I've done a lot of these like international master classes now, and this one was particularly special because we were conducting our own work. All the composers wrote for full orchestra, and I wrote for string orchestra, and so did he wrote for string orchestra as well. And so there was kind of something special about the two of us picking that and sort of excluding the rest of the orchestra. And I always look back and go, oh, it would have been really cool to have gotten a recording and to have conducted the full orchestra. But I was also very happy with the strings, and it was great. It was a great experience. So yeah, shout out to the Grafening Festival and their Ink Still Wet program, because that was like one of the best weeks of my life. Like being in Austria during the summer, watching like the Berlin Philharmonic, and then conducting my music and drinking really amazing Austrian wine and eating wonderful food. It was just like highlight of my life. So yeah, I got the chance to meet Yair and get to know his music. Really, really amazing music, great string writing, and some really phenomenally interesting techniques that I must say I have since borrowed and used in my pieces. So look up Yair Klartag and his amazing music. And we've come to the final of my extra large scores. We certainly went on this journey far quicker than the scores on the shelf. And here is a composer that is so interesting to me, and that is Heiner Goebbels, and this work called Surrogate. And I got obsessed with this piece a couple of years ago, probably when it first came out. There's a recording on YouTube, which I can link like in the notes below. I just got obsessed with this recording. It's piano, percussion, and a speaker. And I've always wanted to do this work, and I've never had the chance. And it's like fast and it's like a theater, like hectic theater scene, and the speaker talking to you, and oh my God, it's just really exciting. And I love when chamber music steps over the line into being theater. I love the theater. I love writing opera. Like that's my calling in life, is opera. And so I love when like chamber music or concert music kind of leans into the theater of what it is. And this is one of those works. Heiner Goebbels is a really inspiring composer to me because he's trained as a composer at the like highest level, great craft as a composer, but he's also a theater maker and a director, and he makes theater, and it's incredible. And he's a huge inspiration to me, and I would love the opportunity one day to possibly meet him. I've seen some of his works when they've been brought out here by our major arts festivals here in Australia. One work, I can't recall the title of it, but it was for a youth choir, and they performed, this incredible stage production, theater production, and then sang all of this incredible music, some by him, some folk music. It was like Slovakian folk music or something. He's a really interesting guy. And whenever I get in a little bit of a rut about who I am as an artist or what I want to be doing in the world, I go to his work because he's touched on so many different things. There's a really fascinating piece that he reorchestrated and constructed for, I think, Ensemble Modern, that's about Hans Eisler, the composer during, who was like a protest composer in Germany, I think after the Second World War, and like political songs. He's got works that are, more theater based. He's got installations, he's got sound artwork. So yeah, a composer that I would, love to see myself on that kind of scale, in terms of I don't just write chamber music, I don't just write orchestra music, but bringing music into so many different other parts of art and creativity. Really inspiring to me. Oh my God. So that's it of my big, massive scores. A much quicker video than the previous one, but somehow a much larger pile, of course. So I hope these scores have been interesting for hear me talk about these scores, and that there's something in there for you to listen to. Let me know what you think if you do listen to any of these pieces, because there really is a very interesting mix of music here. And yeah, I have been really happy just sharing my collection with everyone. It's been a real pleasure to just kind of remind myself I've got all this cool music, and hopefully I've inspired some people to listen to some new pieces. So thanks for coming on this journey with me.